Hey, if you're thinking, I barely have time to write, let alone start a podcast, I got you. My Start Your Author podcast checklist helps busy writers like you start a podcast without sacrificing your writing time. No more guessing or Googling. Starting is actually the easiest part of podcasting, and with this step-by-step checklist, you can fit it in over the next 6 weeks or even next weekend. Stop letting uncertainty hold you back. Grab your free checklist at the link below and get on your way to serving your target readers today. If your podcast pitch looks like it could have been copied and pasted into 100 inboxes, chances are it's headed straight for the trash. As an author, your book is unique, and every podcast you want to appear on is unique too. Hosts like me can spot a cookie-cutter pitch from a mile away, y'all. And if that's your first impression on a host, well, you might just blow your chance at not only serving their listeners, but any chance at future collaborations too. Hey, I'm Kim, and I'm so thrilled you're here to learn how to reach and serve your readers on podcast. So today, let's talk about one of the most common mistakes authors and their publishers make with podcast pitching, and that is sending cookie-cutter pitches. And more importantly, how we can fix it so your pitch actually gets a yes. So I was inspired to share this episode after receiving a cookie-cutter guest pitch from a large publisher. But know that what I'm sharing will apply to you even if you're your own publisher, because this is a mistake I see authors making time and again. Now, in all fairness, I do want to say that with traditional publishers, especially large ones, they are hyper-focused on pitching you to podcast only for a set amount of time around your release date, because that's when they're putting the most resources behind you and your book, whether they're pitching from in-house publicists or they're outsourcing to PR firms or hiring somebody that you suggested them to pitch you. So they're trying to get the maximum amount of exposure in that short window of time. And you may be doing the same as a publisher of your own book. I can remember being in marketing meetings with large traditional Christian publishers back when I helped launch books, and we would talk about the podcasts they were going to be reaching out to versus the ones that we wanted to reach out to first, the author and I. Because sometimes the hosts were also on our influencer list to receive books ahead of time. Maybe the hosts were really good friends. Sometimes the host you're reaching out to has recently been a guest on our podcast, right? So we want to make sure we have all those connections down so we can reference them. And we don't want to just send that host a cold cookie cutter podcast pitch like we don't know them out of the blue, right? When we already have a relationship with them. So instead, we reached out ahead of time to give them a heads up. We sent our personal communication to the host and just said, hey, just heads up, this is coming from the publisher. And that way, if it's a cold one, they don't mind so much, right? And if you haven't heard my conversation with author Rebecca George on pitching as a first-time author, we talk about this a little bit on episode 165, and I'll be sure and link it in the show notes. And listen, podcast pitching has changed a lot over the past few years. It's no longer just send a media kit with a cold email saying, here's an author to interview about their book. That just assumes as a host that I'm sitting around wishing I had more authors to interview, right? And maybe there are shows that do that, right? If they only talk to authors about their books and they just talk about book after book after book, they may be looking for new authors. But most of the time, that's not the case with the podcast that we're pitching. Today, it's more about a collaboration between you, the author as a guest, and the host you're pitching. So it's putting your listeners first, whether they're your listeners or, the host listeners that you're serving. And you're thinking, what problem do they need help with that me, the author, and my resource, which is my book, helps solve? It's more about serving the listeners with a topic they haven't heard before, or even a fresh spin on an old topic they're familiar with, right? So it's about matching your message to the mission of the host show, not the other way around. But your publisher, and again, this might be you if you are self-published, may not have the time to personalize your podcast pitch, right? You may only have a short window to work in and feel that a cookie cutter pitch sent to the masses might work best for you. And if it is working, hey, that's awesome. You can hit stop right now, right? But in case if it's not working, let's talk about some simple ways this pitch could have gotten a yes from me instead of a no. So first off, this was a cookie cutter pitch email. I probably have said that a million times, right? Because the only thing personalized in the email was my name. Hi, Kim. The rest of it was just boilerplate. It didn't mention my podcast name. It didn't mention that they knew how I served listeners or what topics we even talked about. They could have gotten my attention, especially as a publisher, by mentioning other authors that have been interviewed on my show that are published with them. Or like you could mention past guests you have a relationship with to the host, right? They didn't introduce the author at all, like at all. Well, I'm sorry, they did mention her name, but I guess they were just assuming I would know who they were, which I did not. So, this doesn't need to be a big, long bio about all your awards you've won and all the best-selling novels you've written or anything like that. This is just a short sentence about you, the author, and who you serve, right? Not just your name. Okay, so then no topic was suggested. It was just the book to talk about, which if you've been around here a while, you know how important it is to suggest topics to your host. And we talked about this as recently as just 2 episodes ago with Linda Goldfarb, so I'll let you listen to that one to get some ideas. Then the email included the author's book blurb, which is just copied into the email from Amazon or the back of their book for me to read. And that too needed some work and included things that were great for a reader. Like if I am on your Amazon sales page trying to decide to buy the book, or I'm at a bookstore looking at the back of your book, these things would be important, but not in an email to a host to ask them to decide whether or not to collaborate with you on an episode. So the pitch also linked the author's media kit for me if I wanted more information, which obviously just by this email, I would need more information to make a decision. But when I pulled up the media kit, it was just repeated her book blurb again that I already had in the email, along with a bio of the author. But again, that was just all her accolades, not how she serves readers. Now, the good thing is the media kit did include interview questions, which you probably remember from my past episode with Linda Goldfarb. We talked about that. And that's great, right? That's great to have those interview questions if you have decided to say yes to a pitch. Then they sent the email to an email address they found for my podcast on a podcast database somewhere. And I did that on purpose because it's another dead giveaway that this is a cookie cutter pitch being sent out to the masses. Now, if they had visited my website instead, they would have found a form for potential guests and how I go about that and what we talk about. Finally, the book being pitched was a seasonal one, and I received this email 2 months before the episode would have had to be aired. Now, for some people, that might sound like a long time, right? For hosts, it's not at all. We've gotten so much better over the last few years at batching ahead and getting our content, scheduled ahead so that we're not slammed in between these different seasons, right? So if we send it out so much closer to when we want the episode to air, we're just assuming the host, again, is just waiting around for somebody to come along and fill their guest calendar. That's not the case with me, and I don't think it's the case with many of the podcast hosts that I talk to. So we've talked about the importance of pitching earlier and earlier, and even more so with a seasonal topic. Now, if you do have a seasonal book or a topic that's related to only a certain season of the year, and you're pitching on your own, you could add in a non-seasonal topic. That way, if the show is booked for that time period, which mine was, the host would have other topics to consider for the new season coming up. They wouldn't automatically just discount it as, oh, I'm booked for this time period, I can't have this guest on, when they could have brought some other value to my listeners with different topics. Or you could pitch the seasonal topic, but really hone in on a new angle, or even better, a sense of urgency that I might consider. And if it's really good, y'all, I might have considered airing a bonus episode if my schedule is full, because we can always do that. That's the cool thing about hosting a podcast. It's your show. You do it the way you want. You can be as flexible as you want. So listen, whether your publisher is pitching you or they're outsourcing to a PR firm or to an individual to pitch you, and they will let you know all that in your marketing meetings, or perhaps you're outsourcing yourself, I want you to ask to collaborate on the pitch list of shows. So if you know the host, you can reach out and give them a heads up. Hey, a pitch is coming from my publisher, a book is coming if that's the case, and you want to make sure that they've got the right email address or the right mailing address if they're mailing something, but it's usually the pitch is coming in email. So make sure they have the right email address. And also, by knowing the pitch list of shows that they're reaching out to, you're going to know where your publisher's PR ends so you can pick up where they left off. And I know back when I used to sit in on the meetings with publishers, they had a set time frame to work in. And if they outsourced it, they typically had like a set number of shows they would pitch. So that was even more important to know because you knew they were only going to pitch a certain number. And so you knew you were going to be picking up the other number to pitch yourself. And now I think when publishers do it in-house, they probably have a lot more flexibility and they can reach out to more shows, which is great if they're not doing the cookie cutter pitching. So you want to know their pitch list, and be familiar with it. And also, if you see the pitch list ahead of time, it gives you an opportunity to reach out to that host first. So, like if you don't know them, you don't want the cold email to be the very first thing that lands in their inbox when they don't know you. You want to start building those relationships now, right? Just start engaging with them wherever they're active. If it's on social media or in their email list, just start getting to know them. And it's going to lead to a much better opportunity for you to get a yes if that host doesn't know who you are when they receive the pitch. And I'll be sure and link to my episode playlist that talks about building relationships before you pitch. And also, whether your publisher is pitching you, outsourcing, or you're doing it yourself, or you're paying for somebody yourself, ask to collaborate on the pitch email itself. Because typically it's like a template and then you're going to personalize it. So you at least want to get your eyes on the template and be able to share ways that you would personalize it if you were sending it out. Then also, as they get going pitching, ask for updates on how the pitching is going. Obviously, if you're getting yeses, you're going to know because your publisher is going to be booking you for interviews. But if they're getting some no's, you want to know that too, right? Because sometimes, again, is it the pitch that's getting the no and you would love to help personalize it? Or, ask if they'll share, why did the host say no? Was it timing? Even if it's not a seasonal topic, it might be that their list is full, right, of guests. Or was it the topic? So do you need to look at some different topics? Or was it that, you're a first-time author and they only interview authors with more experience and more books under their belt? All those things, whoever is pitching you, they get those answers back from the host and they can share them with you. And that way you'll know if you can follow up later with a different topic or a different angle, or at least know I need to warm this relationship up a little bit more and keep that going because there's always next time for your next book, right? Remember, your message is one of a kind, so your podcast pitch should be too. If you need some help pitching podcasts and avoiding common mistakes I see authors making, I'm going to link to 2 of my podcast playlists so you can listen in and hopefully be inspired to make your next podcast pitch stand out. Thanks for tuning in to Book Marketing Mania today. And as always, I'll be there for you next episode to help you reach and serve your readers one podcast at a time. See you then.